And we're ready to call this meeting to order. And we have a quorum.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. The next item is the confirmation of the meeting agenda. And what I'm hoping is we have two individuals here, Joe Michelangelo and the first selectman, when he makes it. No, it's not here. Who need to leave earlier than later. So what I'd like to do is move item 7 up and as the first agenda item, if nobody has an objection, we'll get right into the issue of the building. Is that any objection to that at all? No. It said we're approved to adjust the agenda. Next item then, in the revised order of business, would be to review and approve the meeting minutes from 2:25. They've been distributed?
Yeah.
Yep. I entertain a motion to waive reading and accept with any corrections that the committee might have. Is there a motion?
I'll move it. Second.
There's a made and seconded. Anybody have any comments regarding the meeting minutes, the draft? Hearing none, motion to approve? Yeah, we have a motion. Vote to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
Okay. So under the new, under the revised order of this meeting, we're going to take item 7. This is a continuing agenda item, the design scope and cost and funding impact, and timing and feasibility regarding the proposed increase in the building height. There are several elements to this. We're going to have a cost report or an estimated cost for the work from Shawmut. We're going to hear from Kevin, from DeStefano and Chamberlain regarding the parking lot grades, options, and issues. We're going to hopefully hear from Joe. We may have to move this around a little bit to make sure you're here, Joe, on the FEMA flood management certificate and FEMA in general. So this is the third time. This is a continuing agenda item and represents the proposal to increase the building height by 1 foot to comply with the HUD requirements for the state block grant, which I think, Joe, is $500,000, right?
Correct.
Right. So we can take this in almost any order, these subsets of this agenda item. Maybe the first thing to do is to set the stage with the cost. So, because there are half a dozen issues that relate to increasing the building height. So I'm assuming that this document is the estimated cost to increase the building height?
Combination of estimated cost and numbers that we received from our subcontractors.
Joinks.
Okay, so for purposes of discussion, the committee's been provided with an estimate from Shawmut, the project construction manager, in the amount of $361,053, which is the added cost to increase the building height 1 foot, to make the floor elevation, increase the floor elevation, flood elevation by 1 foot to comply with, I hope I get this right, Joe, to comply with the state requirements, the DEP requirements, that in a V zone, the building be constructed 1 foot above the FEMA criteria.
Correct, or 1 foot of freeboard
1 foot of freeboard, okay.
window.
Okay, so that's a number. The next issue would be, Joe, if you could walk us through where we are with this request to increase the freeboard of the building 1 foot.
Right here?
Good.
So a couple of things as I reported at the last meeting, a couple of things we were doing internally as staff was keeping your options alive for raising the building. And a couple of things that requires, if we take state funds, we need a floodplain management certificate. So we had to go through the application process as if this committee had already said we're going to raise it 1 foot. So we went through that process, had some plans revised late January, sent them into DEP, began the review process. Concurrently, we were still working with our Department of Housing for the Community Development Block Grant to make sure we got the release of funds, and they were both interrelated. So the good news is that I have some correspondence here today. We wrapped everything up yesterday afternoon, or at least probably wrapped it up yesterday afternoon. Convinced the people at DEEP that our plans, which were revised by the engineer, met their criteria or will with several comments. So they had some comments which Kevin Chamberlain could revise the plans about the breakaway walls, mainly perfunctory, nothing major. They did have some comments on the our revetment wall in front, which they put in emails, which I pass along. But once again, it's something that we could work with them on. But the end result of the meeting was you will get a floodplain management certificate. We just have to, address a few items. And that satisfied the gentleman from the Department of Housing. So they've approved that $500,000 plus the other grants that we have for the revetment there. And one of the things that we also did when this issue came up, we submitted another application for additional funding for community development block grant. And we received word today, and that's in writing too, that we've been approved for an additional $300,000. So where we're at now is if we raise the building, we get $500,000 that we're figuring out all along, and there's an additional $300,000 available also that will be available through the Department of Housing too. And the criteria for that is raising the building the 1 foot. And as far as the Connecticut DEP criteria, and I'll pass out some papers. There's an email in the back, and most of them relate to the revetment wall. Basically, our driven sheet pile that's been there for years, the bulkhead, for 3 or 4 years, the bulkhead, with the revetment in front of them, is not the type of thing that they encourage. They don't like hard, massive structures on the beach. They'd like more passive ones. And you can read that in the email, and once again, it's not a you shall do this or you shall do that. You can see it's sort of a cooperative effort that, I think we could get to a revetment wall that works for us and satisfies them very quickly. And another, I think the only other caveat to the whole thing is that we'd have to satisfy, it's not a unlimited, we have to do that rather quickly. Our floodplain management certificate has to be in place before we start doing any real earthwork. So with the schedule of the project, we're probably around 4 weeks or so before we are starting to affect the ground proper. So all our I's, all our T's dotted with DEP before that time frame. Their criteria is you can't put a shovel in the ground. So that's the criteria. And I will
So if I get this, Joe, we had an original block grant of $500,000. There is did the town apply for this additional $300,000?
Correct. We applied for it probably somewhere around February 1st when it became known that the that the issue of raising the building was a fly in the ointment. So once everybody gets it, the top page is the release of funds. So that's sort of what we're waiting for from Department of Housing, HUD, all along. That everything is fine with them. We've gone through the binder book that I brought to one meeting that was about 3 inches thick of all the hoops we had to jump through to satisfy their provisions. That has been completed, and they signed off that we have complied with it. That's the first letter from Alana Cable, who is a federal employee, to the state employee, Ms. Klein, who is the actual recipient. Second page, which is literally dated, and you can see the dates on these. The top one is March 9th. The second letter is our award letter for the additional $300,000. It explains an overview of what it's for. So it was our request for additional funds. And the third was just a recap of the meeting that I mentioned from yesterday with the woman Crystal Kallenberg, who's from the from DEEP, the Office of Long Island Sound, and she basically memorialized the conversations we had at the meeting on Wednesday morning.
So the criteria for the second grant is the same criteria as for the first grant?
Correct. We're still required to have the one for the freeboard. And as I mentioned, the thing that's out there is, we have to wrap up the floodplain management certificate, just the loose ends, and the only substantial thing that we sort of have to work towards. Their main objection, and I wouldn't really call it objection, the thing they're nudging us about is the hard revetment wall right up against the beach.
What is their suggestion?
They like more passive type structures as opposed to wood and rock.
They like the old bulkhead with the holes through it?
Well, no, I think, as we reach,
That was passive.
as we reach the compromise, I think they, once again, we'll get to that solution, but probably not without the boulders, probably sand over the bulkhead wall. And I think it's one of their concerns is bulkheads, hard structures, scour, and, to our defense, well, this is a beach that we maintain 365 days a year. We have intentions of making engineered beaches. So not only will we put the sand to the bulkhead wall or right to the top of the bulkhead wall, we're in the business of maintaining beaches, so we don't plan to do it once and walk away. We plan to do it and, part of our daily maintenance procedure for forever and ever.
Are there suggestions regarding the bulkhead represent a reduction in scope and cost or an increase in scope and cost compared to what we plan to do?
One of the, it's probably a wash. We'd be investing less into the revetment. And once again, this is still a work in progress. We'd be investing less in the revetment. We'd have to we'd probably spend a few bucks to dispose of our broken up concrete. That's where we're going to put a lot of it.
Okay. Yes, questions from the committee?
Getting rid of the bulkhead, is that or is that not a condition of these two grants?
No, and once again, in that email, that is not a outright condition. And if you can see the tone of the email, it's very, it's not a authoritative type email. It's not a you shall do this. It's a, let's work towards the solution. And by no way, shape, or form do we want to remove the piles that were driven 4 years ago and have been in place since.
what I'm concerned about is that we've been finding out things at the last minute with these grants. What I don't want to have happen is if we make a decision to keep the bulkhead in place, to find out after the fact that, oh yeah, by the way, we're not going to reimburse you because you didn't take the bulkhead out. Certainly a conciliatory tone in the email, but the fact that, again, this is being brought up now as opposed to 6 months ago or a year ago, you know, it always seems to be a moving target with these state agencies, and I just want to make sure that we have some reassurance from our, our friends at Deep that we're not going to be looking at losing out on money because we made a decision one way or the other with the bulkhead.
Correct. The removal of the driven piles and the bulkhead wall, the physical thing that's there, it's not a tit for tat. They're holding the floodplain management certificate. They want us to. They don't like the wall that's there, but they didn't say, the bulkhead must go.
Okay.
And the woman from Office of Long Island Sound, is in Fairfield quite often. She works with Jim Went and Joe Binkowski daily. She gets copies of every single one of our planning and zoning agendas, reviews them. So there is a history between us and the staff.
Okay.
A good history.
Jim, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
If we take the $300,000, do we have to go back now? The cost of the project is going to be elevated again. Do we have to go through the process again?
We're going to address that to the first selectman,
Okay.
who's been kind enough to be here, and I want to get him to speak as quickly as possible. So, any questions? Keep going. No, keep
I'll
going.
reserve it until
No.
later. I just don't want to, by taking one, create additional problems to us.
Right. Any questions at the moment?
I just have a comment. I mean, the email is pretty clear, and it says that they recommend that the bulkhead be removed. So I don't know how much give and take there really is in this thing.
And once again, that is, it's a planning, that's the person I wrote the letter, and that office is a planning office, it's not a permitting office.
Let me just give you a break there for a minute. Kevin, a soft versus hard approach to protecting the foundation. I'm sure you've heard what's been going on over the past couple of days. Is there a way to accommodate the DEP's comments using the existing bulkhead, reconfigure it, cutting it down, using a different type of riprap or something to make it a softer approach?
So the reason why we're building the revetment is to address the scour issue that they're really concerned about. Their take is, well, then get rid of the bulkhead. That's not our take. We want to keep the bulkhead
Right.
because there is a beneficial effect to the building. So, the direction I'd like to see that mitigation going would be to ramp the sand up and basically bury the bulkhead. So we just have more beach coming up higher, meeting the bulkhead and not having it be exposed.
Is the classic bulkhead riprap configuration pretty much what we're doing? In other words, if you just took the bulkhead out and put the riprap back, you'd have to reconfigure the riprap. It would have to be graded, you'd probably use some kind of synthetic fabric. You just can't throw riprap on the beach and consider it effective, can you?
No, so then it would be like a rubble mound of riprap that's buried or a reinforced core, if you will, to
Right.
the dune.
Right.
But you don't really need to do that.
If you have the
because
bulkhead right there. Okay. Joe, one final question for the committee, and that is, the other thing that we learned a couple of weeks ago, or we were talking about, was FEMA. Is this work FEMA eligible, this proposed work of raising the building? Is it eligible for FEMA reimbursement?
Correct, yeah, it's all part of our costs, so our costs are, they're not capped at any set limit. So one of the,
How about the question, though, to them? If the committee or somebody, the town, invests another $300,000 in this project, do we get 75% of it back?
yes, it should be, it's an eligible cost, correct.
So raising the building, the cost involved in that, even though our worksheet doesn't include that at the moment, is eligible?
It should be, once again, they're not, dry answers. You have to submit something and get approval. But just like everything else we come across on this project that is not defined in our plans, our project is not capped at a certain limit.
Can I just turn it another way? Let's assume this number is $400,000, and let's say we reject the $300,000 grant. So we could get 75% of this $360,000? That's almost what you just said, though.
Well, one of the benefits of getting our $500,000 grant, one of the benefits of that is not only, that it's money, it counts as the town's 25% share. So even though that money may be eligible afterwards, not accepting the $500,000 is a direct hit on our share.
CPA, did you get that?
No, because excuse me.
I
If the
don't want to
costs-
disrespect you because you're an honorable man, but quite frankly,
Yeah.
it would see, I'm just, again, let me reserve my comments until, you said the first selectman will address what's the impact of spending $300,000 to the cap on a project. Maybe I'll ask a further question later. In the meantime, I'll withdraw the comment, the question.
Okay, are there any other questions? What I hoped for, given the time, was to have the First Selectman Tetro give us some background guidance, these grants. These are questions which are beyond the charge of the committee, and I don't want to lead this committee into the wilderness on this issue. So I need some kind of guidance, whether or not, the question's pretty straightforward. Either we raise the building and have the benefits of these two grants, or we leave the building as it is, the way it's designed, and the way it's currently under construction, and we don't get the grants. Is that right, Joe? Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, correct. We could go ahead with the project, as planned, exactly as bid and underway and financed, just removing the $500,000 from the equation.
So the representations that were made by the Finance Department throughout all the approval process would still be the same representation, but short $500,000.
Correct.
So the net cost of the town would go up by $500,000?
Correct.
Mr. First Selectman, thank you very much. I know you've got budget meetings and everything else. No, you could stand, you could join us, you could actually join the committee. Probably would.
No, well, it's come.
You could even take my place on the
Yeah.
committee permanently.
Yeah, just to say, be very careful.
Got a good mic for a good mic here.
You're here now.
How many votes do you think I get to do that? One, thank you for letting me come tonight and talk, and if you could, one question at a time, and let me do my best to provide an answer.
Mike, I think the first question that this committee's been struggling with is, number one, if the building is increased in height by 1 foot, is that in keeping with typical town projects as far as the materiality of that? Is that a normal? Is that well within the bounds of what the Board of Selectmen deals with in the RTM and approves? That's the first question. And the second question is, are we doing the town, what are we doing here when the committee either accepts or rejects these grants? The first one is increasing the building by 1 foot. Obviously went through the entire approvals process at X height, and now there's a proposal before the committee to increase it X plus 12 inches, based on the eligibility, conditions of these grants.
Okay. As I understand it going through, as we got into looking at the HUD grant that we had been approved for in the past, it's not HUD, but DEEP that has the rule or regulation or request or requirement that we raise it the other foot. The issue for the most part is that if this were a residential structure, we'd already have to meet that extra foot of freeboard going through, because it's a commercial structure. Commercial structures aren't required to do that yet. So from HUD standpoint, that wasn't an issue. When DEEP weighed in, and DEEP approves any of the funds or grants handed out because it's in a flood zone, a floodplain, DEEP gets involved. And their requirement came in literally at the 11th hour to do that, because that wasn't something that had been in the mix before or understood as part of the approval process. So from a town standpoint, we routinely meet what the FEMA requirements are. We routinely meet what grant requirements are. Grant requirements are a little bit more flexible, because if you want the grant, you meet the requirements. So it's not a town code or charge. In order to build a structure, we have to obey zoning, we have to obey building codes. In this case, we have to obey FEMA rules to do that.
And DEP.
We don't have to, but if we want the HUD grant,
Yeah, we do.
we do.
Yeah. Okay, just as far as you've gone with that, questions you have?
Yeah, just on this point. If we raise it another foot, are we still within the parameters of the bonding resolutions that were passed by the town bodies? So would we have to go through the process again, or are we good with what's been approved by Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, RTM?
Mr. Polito, you read these things pretty closely. I'm going to give you my memory and
Okay.
my
Because I
understanding
don't have
at
it in
this
front of me,
point.
that's what I'm
asking. You have impressed me over time as always being closer to the facts than almost anybody that I know. So, but it's my understanding that the charge, I believe, may talk about FEMA. I don't quite remember it, but it doesn't get into requirements for any additional grants. That would be at the discretion of this board. This board has been given a set amount of money to build or rebuild Penfield Pavilion from that standpoint. I think you're pretty flexible in how you do that.
Right.
There were some issues, I believe you pointed out in the bond resolution, I think last time when we went through.
Yeah.
So I will defer to your memory on that, just what those were.
Right.
But
What
I
I'm- what
believe
I'm-
you have flexibility within that.
Do we
to make those
specify an
decisions.
elevation in the bonding resolution? That's what I'm trying to remember.
To the best of my memory, no.
Yeah, I don't think so either, because that would be my concern. If we didn't, then we would have the flexibility, but if we did, different story.
The issue is you're authorized at this point to spend $7.4 million.
Right.
Anything that goes above that would require authorization from the boards.
And that's my concern, because we're basically, in order to qualify for this grant and raise the building another foot, we're looking at going into our owner's contingency to do that. If for some reason, God forbid, it ends up exceeding what that contingency is and we go over budget, that means mid-project potentially, we could be looking at going to the town boards and bodies for more money.
Yeah, philosophically, you and I have been through the, and I'm going to say the building process a few times dating back to our days on the Board of Finance. Philosophically, and Mr. Bradley and I have had this conversation, I believe contingency money is money that's planned to be spent. We don't know on what yet, but we wouldn't have guidelines of 10% contingency or 5% contingency or 8% contingency unless we knew that was typically being spent. So I would be very concerned if we started a project without the appropriate contingency.
Right. We're a little tight to begin with, so it's a concern of mine too.
We're at 10%
Yeah.
between the total contingency, between the construction managers and owners' contingency.
And again, I don't mean to cast judgment on 10% versus 8%. That's not what I was getting at. This building committee with
Consensus is...
combined wisdom knows what an appropriate number is, and I would support your decision in that regard.
Well, we have two problems in that regard. One is we feel the contingency is low, given the way this project is, the joy of managing this project. And the second thing is, this particular proposal would wipe out the owner's contingency. It wouldn't wipe out all the contingency, but it would certainly wipe out the owner's contingency. And we don't have much control over the other half of the contingency, which is under the control of the construction manager. So, we have the funding, but we'd have to go back through the system pretty quickly to replenish what was taken out, and if this were to be, a proposal would be approved by the committee.
Correct, and I would encourage you to make sure that you have the appropriate contingency. That would be my guideline.
How does the town feel about these grants? In other words, this is a tough situation, tough questions. I mean, we've worked very hard on this project. We've worked hard to make it aesthetically pleasing as possible. We now are faced with a situation where we could easily turn down by continuing with the project as is, the way it was proposed and approved. And are these significant issues to the town, this $500,000 and the possible follow-on of the $300,000? I mean, who says we can't do, who says we can turn, can we turn our backs on these grants?
It would be my understanding that at this point, this board has been authorized to spend $7.4 million and rebuild Penfield Pavilion.
Right.
You haven't been required to accept any grants. You've been allowed to accept any grants, certainly, but you haven't been required to accept those, especially with what I'll call, and it's, I think it's been characterized here as 11th hour changes to some of the requirements.
See, am I correct that even if, forgetting about, let's say we reject the $500,000 grant, forget about the $300,000. Even if FEMA gives us 75% of the $400,000, we still could be over the project unless we can use the contingencies. Am I correct?
I think you're saying two different.
In other words, let me do it again. In
Forgive
other
me, I
words,
think-
if we give up the $500,000.
I'm not following the conversation. You mentioned 400,000. I'm not.
I'm just rounding up 360 to 400, just for round numbers' sake.
Talking about the
In other
additional
words,
costs.
we're approved they said the cost is 360, by the time we get through, let's say it's 400.
Okay.
So in fact, if
That's
we-
the cost to raise it 1 foot?
Right, that's the
Okay,
one, I'm
thank
sorry, I
you, thank you.
apologize for that. So in fact, if we go ahead and reject the $500,000 grant, we could conceivably get 3/4 of the $400,000 from FEMA. That's what
Town.
the child said. But by spending that, we still could be over the limit. So even if the town would get the money, we'd be in violation of our charter.
Yeah, let's look at, there are two different issues here that do get confusing. So one is the authorization to spend.
Right.
You've got authorization to spend $7.4 million. Your current plan does that.
Yes.
Any additional money, and this would be an additional $360,000 coming in, that would be on top of the $7.4 million. Because we'd be spending that before we get the grant, because it's a reimbursement type grant. You need authorization in addition to what you have to spend this money unless you took it all out of contingency.
Right. We'd have-
However, you would get, for the cost involved, the 360 of raising, that would be FEMA eligible, at least as we understand it, and be subject to 75% reimbursement.
So 75%, or 25% of 400,000 would be the town's cost, so to
For
speak.
just the raising.
Yeah,
Just for
correct.
raising, that's what we did. But rejecting the 500, but replacing it with
Right.
FEMA. But again, the whole project is whether we can build a project and stay within the cap on the thing.
But
And then if we have,
if you're going to raise it a foot to incur this expense, you'd accept the 500,000.
Yeah, they kind of go, I would
They're
think they
hand in
kind of go
hand.
hand in
I mean,
hand,
you
because
wouldn't-
the whole reason we wouldn't raise it another foot is because of the issues with
No,
contingency.
I'm just trying to think of what the net cost of the town is. The net cost of the town is 25% of the
Would
400,000.
be another,
360.
would be another $100,000 over what has been planned at this point.
Right. And the decision for the committee would be, what is the impact on the building and possible additional costs?
Correct.
Because of the parking lot and so forth.
So I think that,
So it's-
as I would characterize the decision before this body, it's either build the project as currently approved and designed, with a net increase of $500,000 for the town. That $500,000, like the balance of the town portion, would be bonded and spread over 20 years, or $25,000 a year, minus the interest cost. So I didn't do it, include the interest in that, but, all right. Versus doing the add-on design, raising it another foot, getting additional reimbursements in terms of the grants, the HUD grants, that would help defray the net cost. But you would most likely probably have to go back to the boards and delay the process a couple of months to get authorization to go with the 7.4 number.
And that was my issue,
And-
that's exactly my question.
And it also, and Mr. Bradley, I remember one of your comments so clearly, when we were going through the kind of, some of the design process originally, it's when we look at these 11th hour changes, when we've been going in one direction for, in this better part of a year, 9 months.
I think it's going on 5 years, it feels like it.
Well, this design portion.
Oh, this
I know
board,
this
yeah.
board has worked diligently for all that time, and I didn't mean to shortchange you at all.
By a year or
December
two.
2013.
However, I think this design got finalized roughly at some point, and we've
Right.
tweaked it a whole bunch in
Yeah.
between.
Correct.
But it's basically been the same design. We had some bidding issues, we came back, it's been roughly the same design for that time. To go back in and change it, look at raising a foot, looking at the, what I'll call the large amount of less significant change, all the ramps, all the, just, you know, having the pilings a foot higher seems pretty straightforward, but everything else involved in that seems to me to complicate it a bit more, and again, I'm going to go back to doing my best to quote you again, and that you increase the risk of something else being complicated by this. As you take a structure that's already complex enough, or challenging enough as it is, you're adding another level of complexity. From the outside, it doesn't seem too bad. You raise a foot, how hard can that be?
Right.
We know that is not correct. We know it is hard. I don't mean to shortchange the engineers or anything else on that. So my concern would be, does it really get done for this?
Right. Go ahead.
I commend the first selectman on his observations. I think there's one thing that we've left out. If we leave the plan as is, which is what we've been approved for, the 7.4 million, we allegedly forfeit, potentially, because it's not cast in stone, the $500,000 grant. There is an appeal process. We can go through that appeal process. It sometimes delays the project, but if we move on with our project while in the appeal process, we have nothing to lose. We have everything to gain. I've checked with the state of Connecticut, and it's also in writing from what Mr. Michelangelo has provided. One other fact that I'd like to bring up. If we leave the project as is, which is the amount that we've been approved to spend, which is $7.4 million with the current design, it's not an additional cost to the town of $500,000. Because that $500,000 that's not being provided by the state grant is now eligible to be applied towards the 75% rule in FEMA.
Good point, again. In other words, if we lose it from the state grant, we could make up
Exactly.
my 3/4 of $400,000 from the HUD.
I don't believe that last part is correct. Can I offer two questions? Sure. It was my understanding that if we go through the waiver or exemption process, we couldn't start construction.
I'll double check that, but I'll double check that.
All right, I believe that was when we first heard about this, we looked at a number of options. The waiver exemption process, the steps don't appear complicated. When we looked at the actual time frame from a couple real examples, it's like 9 months to a year.
It is long.
So if we can do that in parallel and start construction and proceed on anyway, certainly we can take a look at that just for discussion purposes, because we did ask that. It was my understanding at the time that we couldn't start construction, which brought up the whole delay the project X amount of time and everything else again. So that was one. And the second piece, I believe that what Mr. Michelangelo tried to say earlier was that we have a certain obligation. We get reimbursed for 75%, but we have to put in 25%. I believe the 500 grand is part of our 25%. So that, no, we would not get reimbursed for the 500 grand.
Right, yeah, but,
I'd like some further clarification on that. My understanding, I could be wrong, was that the 75% rule, as was explained several times by Bob Mayer, was that it covered the total cost, it was 75% of the total cost of the project. If it's 75% of the total cost of the project, which means we obviously put in 25%. If the cost of the project has just increased ostensibly by $500,000,
Cost of the project has not. Cost of the project is still $7.4 million.
'Cause it
I'm
takes
sorry, I
care of
didn't mean to jump
contingency.
into
I see
No,
that.
but it
Right.
will be, excuse me, but it will be because we wouldn't hesitate a nanosecond before going back before the boards to replenish the contingency if we used it. If we raise the building. We'd have
Right,
to-
but if you're going to raise the building, then you get the $500,000, you're not, the cost of raising at the foot is reimbursable. The project as it stands, the 500 grand does not get reimbursed.
That's great for funding sources. Our problem is we're the people that got stuck having to build it and maintain that budget. So if we wipe out the budget, or more than wipe out the line item in the budget for contingency, we still have a whole year to build, or whatever it will be, 8 months, with risk as far as the need to use contingency.
I am suggesting that you make sure you have the appropriate contingency. I'm not...
So we'd have to go
I'm
back
not
to the well.
I'm not quite sure what I said that you're disagreeing with, I guess would be my...
Well,
I think I've been quoting you for the most part in my comments.
maybe about the contingency. I'm not sure you could quote me about what we do with these grants and what this committee should do, because that's the reason I asked you to be here, to help us make this decision, and what the town policy is, or what's the best.
It's up to the discretion of the committee, and that's, we charged you with doing that. You want my thoughts, I'm simply saying that the project as it is complex enough. I don't know if I'd add another layer of complexity for that. Second, I'm not sure these, no disrespect to anybody who put together these numbers, but the 300,000 and has not gone out to bid yet, as we've learned in the past. It adds another level of complexity for all the other changes that it levels around here, and as you pointed out, adds some cost in the parking lot, which is not FEMA reimbursable because that wasn't damaged during the FEMA funding. So it adds a whole nother level of cost on it. Second, as much as the cost to raise, this 360 or whatever it actually costs would be FEMA reimbursable. It just, in my mind, adds a level of cost, and as you said, to do it without going back to the boards for additional funding would wipe out your contingency, and we both agree that's not healthy. To do it without wiping out the contingency means you go back to the boards, and that costs you another couple of months.
Right. Is the grant, can the grant, is the block grant specifically for this project, or is it specifically?
Specifically for this project.
And just so I can, Joe, as I've described the funding source and what's taken place, that's your understanding too, right? I don't mean to change anything from what you understood.
Correct, yeah, I was not in this.
Yeah, I couldn't see that. You're off camera.
You're talking specifically with this? The $800,000 is specifically for this work, so
Bless you.
it has to be associated with this.
Jeff, I think the first selectman is...
Go ahead.
I think the first selectman has made his position very clear. I don't know why you're not grasping.
How long we've been working together?
Too
I'm going to
long.
beat it to death.
Too long.
That's my MO. Okay, any other questions from the first selectman? No?
I'm good.
Oh, you good?
Yeah, just and the only other issue, just as far as you look at that, if the 500,000, and it's not, you're not turning down the 500,000 so much as deciding not to increase the building and increase the cost of the overall project or change the design of the project to qualify for the 500,000.
Right.
If we're not eligible for that 500,000 is how I'd word it. That incremental cost to the town, again, would, with the rest of the town share, would be spread over 25 years. We can go back and take a look. My understanding is the exemption, once we start construction, we don't qualify for that anymore, but we certainly have time to look at that. Since we're not going to, if you choose to go ahead, we're not going to hold that up, we can certainly explore the exemption. We have plenty of time to go back and see if we can qualify for that.
Any other questions?
No.
Yes.
Just so I click, the second grant that you elaborated on tonight, that is also contingent on raising the building above
Correct. The second one is basically hand in hand.
this?
The
Okay.
300 is hand in hand with the
Let's just talk about
Same as
the
that.
800,000 in here.
Yeah, okay.
The,
All right, cool.
the issue, if I might, is not a function of the grant. It's a function of DEEP's requirements or any state agency doing work in a floodplain. So it's not the grant specific, which is why it came up the 11th hour. It's an add-on requirement, not a requirement as part of the grant. You can look over the HUD regs all day long and not find this requirement.
Contingent on that, right?
Am I incorrect? If we didn't have a problem with contingencies, if we raise it a foot, we could get $800,000 grant and 3/4 of it from FEMA, right? FEMA would, one thing has nothing to do with the other. One or the other?
The
3/4 of the 200.
you potentially get the 800,000.
Right.
And you get 3/4 of the cost of raising it a foot, so 3/4 of the
Right.
360.
So we could get both.
Correct.
So the only issue is from a funding, it's a win-win situation.
If I might, and Joe, I just want to confirm with you, on the 500,000, because that's not a function of raising, that's totally separate from raising it or not raising, other than you have to raise it, right? The 300,000 additionally, is that a function of just raising it, or would we get that?
Now, that's a function of raising it.
That's
Well, we
what I
have to
was asking.
raise it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was asking before.
So we could
But
get
can, my
theoretically 800,000.
well, my one concern on the 300 would be whether we can double dip or not, because in essence, we're getting
double
paid
dipping.
twice for the same
Yeah,
construction.
we're double dipping. yeah.
And I don't believe FEMA will let us do that.
That's strict guidelines.
So it's almost, the fact that FEMA would give us 3/4 is not an issue if we take the $800,000. It
Right,
seems to
yeah,
be that
yeah.
FEMA would not double, be able to double
Right.
dip. So it's $800,000. It's not 800,000 plus 3/4
Yeah.
of the $400,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 500 is irrelevant, because that's part of our share and not a function of raising it. It's the 300,000 coming after. I don't believe they'd let us, I did not research that answer previously. This is the first time I'm dealing with that. Just, it seems to me we haven't been able to double dip with any of the FEMA funding in the past, and that would seem consistent with how they do things.
Are there other
CDBG
questions?
block grants state the same thing, actually.
Are there other questions for the first selectman? No. Everybody comfortable with it? Okay.
No.
Thank you, Rich.
Oh, Mr. Special, sorry, I didn't see you.
How could you not see?
He monitors us all the time.
Yeah. Proverbial big brother.
Max headroom.
So no other questions? Thank you very much. I know you have budget, whatever, meetings tonight or
Yes,
whatever
we
it
do.
is.
Go have more
Thank
fun,
you.
Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, one of the next issues on this multi-phase, multi-part agenda item is the whole concept of the 1-foot elevation. I know, Joe, I asked you this question also previously, but I'd like to hear it on behalf of the committee. What does the 1 foot, why the 1 foot, and what does it do for us as far as the project and protecting it? And it didn't just come out of the blue. Is this something the DEP has researched and is imposing in certain areas, or?
Well, the 1 footer. The 1 foot of freeboard is something that FEMA has been encouraging for a while now. Some communities have already adopted it into their zoning regulations. And as I think I've said at the last meeting, the state building code will eventually require that for commercial buildings, not just residential buildings. It's certainly a prudent thing to do. I think if we had all known about this a year ago, we wouldn't be talking about it. The building would be a foot higher. I think it's a very difficult decision to make now because construction has started and kind of past the point where we can really implement that change. I mean, we can do it, but we have to do it immediately if we're going to do it.
Is it, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned, or maybe it was you, Joe, that Jim Wendt said that as a matter of policy, he would encourage this, or what, tell us what that was.
Yeah, and, you know, freeboard is a common term, it's a cushion. So if you're building wherever, so if I was building in Waterbury, one of the first things you do is check the local regs. Does the community require a freeboard or not? And freeboard is an extra cushion over the flood limit to take account in case a log goes down the river, in case there's an ice dam, in case the FEMA calculation isn't right on and it's right there. So it's a factor of safety. That's it's a fairly common tool that some communities implement. So in this case, the state of Connecticut chose to implement it and say, anytime state money is involved, and once again, this criteria is in the coastal zone, free board must be required. And, you know, just if I could almost paraphrase Mr. Went, and one of the, you know, I think, you know, you were all here, but he characterized it as, yeah, it's good practice to go up when you can. You know, one of the benefits that we've been having in our neighborhood is just the fact that, you know, the logistics of it. If somebody's going to elevate their house to the exact floodplain elevation, and they only have 6 feet or 6.5 feet, well, just common sense tells you, let me elevate it to a level so I can get a, you know, headroom under there, so I can walk there, so I can get a vehicle under there. So just by nature of the construction or a beach area, we're obtaining that just because it makes sense for people to do it as a matter of practice.
But somebody said tonight that if you had a private residence on the beach, you had to comply with this 1 foot freeboard?
Yes. In the portion of the building code that deals with 1 and 2 family residences does require that already for any structure in Connecticut, any residential structure.
Regardless of the V-zone environment, which is what we're in.
No, it's only in a V zone.
No, I believe it's only in the V zone.
Only in a V-zone.
Right, but that's a building code trigger, not a zoning or FEMA trigger.
And why is that, Kevin? Is the V-zone particularly...
Are houses more in danger than commercial buildings? No, it's just the residential code made it through the rigorous code adoption process sooner than the commercial code has.
So the commercial code will follow, likely?
The date keeps moving. You know, I think I've been told the end of this year, but that's, you know, they say that a lot, so. The
And you're talking
current
about
building
state
code
building
dates
code.
back to 2005, so, just to give you a frame of reference.
You're talking about, I'm sorry, Jim.
Go ahead.
You're talking about state building code?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that doesn't factor in all the local nuances and building requirements that particular towns have. This is a statewide
Well,
requirement.
as far as building code, that's the only code. It's a
That's it,
state building
okay.
code. The town does have zoning regulations that also relate to flood resistance
Okay.
and building elevation and things like that, yes.
Kevin, while you're there, and I opened up any other questions, this is going to be part of the same subject, so Kevin's not leaving, but... do you have any
Actually,
questions?
we have in writing from the Commissioner of the State of Connecticut that the building has to be raised above the 100-year flood elevation. So as far as the State of Connecticut is concerned, as long as we're above the 100-year flood elevation, they're okay with that. So I don't think we should confuse that with some of the deep issues or some of the other funding issues. As far as the State of Connecticut is concerned, the 100-year flood elevation is their barometer.
And when you say the state of Connecticut, which,
Commissioner Klein?
now you're paraphrasing, you're reading from that letter?
Yeah.
Or- okay.
Second paragraph.
Yeah.
Penfield Pavilion is located at the very popular Fairfield Beach between Long Island Sound and Fairfield Beach Road. The project will include repairs to key structural components, all utilities, and the building will be raised above the 100-year base flood elevation, unquote.
And the...
March 8th, 2016.
And the deeper caveat to that is that regulation, which I think I distributed on January 14th, there's a statute where wherever state money is involved in the coastal zone, there shall be 1 foot of freeboard.
You know, I think we're going to sit here and we can talk all night. To me, it's going to come down to one issue, is are we going to use our contingencies to raise it a foot, or are we going to not, or if we're going to use our contingencies, are we going to go back and get additional approval? Because again, I don't think we should debate whether we should go a foot or not a foot. That's for engineers to decide. We have one issue, is do we want to spend $400,000 of our contingency to go up another foot? If we do, fine, we run the risk of having a problem with a project, or we should say we're going to stop the project, go back to the bodies and get another $400,000. I mean, I don't think we should debate whether it's right or wrong, whether zoning is good, whether it's 100-year, the 2,000-year, or the 500-year, or the foot is good or not. The issue is, do we want to spend $400,000 of contingencies? Or am I missing something?
No, you got it.
I would agree with my colleague. I think this issue to use a phrase, has hair all over it. I think we've heard from the first selectman who has given his opinion, which I happen to agree with, that we're funded, we're approved for $7.4 million. Anything above that would require further town approval. We know what we have in the project that we have. We don't know what we would have if we change the project now. It's kind of late in the game, as to use his words. And therefore, I would like to make a motion that we leave the plans as is.
Just so we can discuss it, I will second it. That doesn't mean I'm for it or not in favor of it, but we need a second so we can discuss
We
it.
have a little more elegant motion than that one.
If you'd like one.
I mean, leave it at...
Can I read? I mean, I believe in the KISS method, you know.
Right.
I would like to make a motion that we leave the proposed plans for the Penfield project as is and forego the additional changes recently proposed by the design team.
Might add additional changes to raise the building 1 foot.
Yeah,
All right.
1 foot.
Right. Do you need me to restate that, or can you just add the 1 foot in there?
Okay, I'll read it back to you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. You're making a motion that we leave the proposed plan for Penfield project as is and forgo additional changes to raise the building 1 foot.
An additional 1 foot.
Can I put my Board of Finance hat on here and all that fun stuff?
Yeah.
I don't think the motion is necessary. I think what we're discussing is making a change to what's already been approved. So essentially I get what Ian's trying to do, but the project's approved, it's funded. So the issue is, are we going up another foot or not? And that is an agenda item, decision whether or not to proceed regarding proposed increase in building height. So as far as I'm concerned, we're discussing that now.
Yeah.
You know, if you're looking to call the question and short circuit all the additional discussion, that's something that can be done. But if you're looking to, you know, have the discussion continue about whether we go up the foot or not, then it's kind of there already.
How about this? If I make a motion that we go back to the town bodies to get additional $400,000 for the project, would that move the discussion along?
No, because we don't know it's going to be $400,000, and we still haven't heard from
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sean.
I was just using the number on there.
We have
If I might respond?
Yes, sir.
My goal is to not beat this dead horse to death any more than we already have. And I encourage the discussion. There's a motion on the table, it's been seconded. There's further discussion that can take place, but I think...
Actually, was it seconded?
Yes, it
You
was
seconded?
seconded.
Just so we can discuss
Okay,
it.
sure.
Yeah.
But I think if we're going to continue to take the attitude of, you know, let's keep going to another doctor until we hear the right answer, then I will object to that. I'll go on record as objecting to that.
Okay, so we're in a period of discussion, the motion's been made and seconded. One thing that we haven't heard about that did influence our debate over the past 2 meetings was the famous parking lot. And whether or not, if the building was elevated by 1 foot, could the aesthetic issues be mitigated by increasing the parking lot height? And Kevin, we asked you to do a quick study. I know, Joe, we asked you to give us some examples, but let us, given where we are, I'm going to ask Kevin to take us through this. And this is something, a document you've already passed out?
Yeah, I don't know if everybody has gotten a copy.
This one?
I don't know.
So the remaining issue here is if the building were to be increased 1 foot, what would the impact, what would you have to do to the parking lot to try to mitigate the height of the building? And the reason I'm bringing it forward at this time in discussion is because it's going to have a cost impact. And so it's going to really impact the committee's thinking regarding the 360,000, maybe 400,000, whatever. So, Kevin, if you wouldn't mind taking us through this, we asked you for it, and we appreciate the fact you've done it.
Sure. What I did was I took 3 slices through the site to see the conditions of existing parking lot pitch, what the pitch would be under the current project, and what it would be under the extra foot project. So that's what the handout is. So if you look at section 1, which is the second page, that's a slice through the parking lot in front of the locker wing. The dark brown is the current situation. The tan color is what we're adding as part of the current bid project. So we're essentially picking the pavement up in this area, only about a half a foot at the building, and then tapering it down to nothing at the street. If we were to raise the building a foot, what we have proposed under the plans that Shawmut used to price this extra, we would be picking up the parking lot another foot from that, which is the red shaded area. So that's the additional amount of fill that would go in to keep the curb up at elevation 9. So this is a slice through the end of the parking lot by the locker wing. The next one is a slice through the parking lot at both the entrance to the parking lot off Fairfield Beach Road and the center of the gathering room. So major access coming into the site. Similar condition, the dark brown is the existing slope. This is the flattest part of the parking lot in front of the entry and going out towards the guard shack and Fairfield Beach Road. The existing lot's only pitched at 1.2%, which is really flat. So under the current project, it goes up to 3%. Under the extra foot raising project, it would go up to 2.5% under the handicap spaces and 4% for the rest of the lot, which is the red shaded area. So you, just gives you a graphical representation of how it would look. And I put some dimensions on these too in case you wanted to scale it with a ruler and kind of get a sense of what the percentages mean. The third and final slice is through the far end of the parking lot in front of the playground where the stone retaining wall is. This one cuts also through our proposed bioswale, aka rain garden. So again, at this area, the lot is very flat. It's only pitched at 1.5%. And under the current project, we go up to 2.9%. And then under the raised project, 3.9%. Now, I'd like to add a footnote to that. We do have the ability to not just tilt the parking lot, but to raise both ends, if you will. We do have our source of fill from the town that is going to be used to create this slope. If the pitches are remaining a cause for concern, we could pick up the end of the parking lot closest to Fairfield Beach Road and try to level it out more. So I just wanted to offer that if that's a significant concern of the committee.
Thank you, Kevin. Questions?
So I hope someone in the audience doesn't mind me stealing some of the material, but I do have a question. In the beach area, are we even allowed to add fill?
We are. That's why we got a special permit from TPC for the fill.
What about conservation?
That does not fall under their jurisdiction as far as I know.
Why is it then that when homeowners down in the beach area want to add fill to their land, they're told they can't?
I don't know the specific circumstances of which properties you're talking about.
Okay, questions for Kevin on this?
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Do you guys want to go?
No.
Table's tilting down here.
I'm in listening mode right now.
Okay.
So-
If you're talking about what you just mentioned, leveling it off on both ends of the parking lot, essentially.
So essentially what we'd have to do, if you can imagine you're turning into the lot from Fairfield Beach Road,
Okay.
the guard shack is there. You have about 25 feet from the gutter line of the street to where the edge of the parking is going to start.
Okay.
So we kind of treat that as a ramp, tilt that up and make that a little bit steeper. That would go up to 8 or 9% pitch. But then you would level out and then you'd get closer to 2.5% for the entire lot.
Now, what would the drop-off be from where Fairfield Beach Road meets the parking lot? What I'm envisioning.
So you get to the edge of the parking lot.
Yeah.
At the bioswale, it's really not much different a condition because you're still going to have a depression where the water is going to run in.
Okay.
At the one area at the east end of the lot where the parking actually comes up almost to the sidewalk, there would be either a little curb to retain that height difference, or just a bevel on the grass, going from the sidewalk up to the asphalt pavement.
And where the car's going, what would be there?
So, in the parking lot itself?
Yeah, as you're turning your car from Fairfield Beach Road past the guard check into the parking lot.
So it's almost like an apron going into a driveway or shopping center that's pitched up like this. You'd be turning in, you would be going uphill, and then you'd level out back into the parking lot.
All right. Now, my next question is, what does that do in terms of runoff? Like, you get a big rainstorm, if you have it leveled off at both ends the way you're talking about, with the materials we're talking about using for the parking lot, is it going to increase runoff into the street and into the neighborhood? Is it going to be neutral as to that type of runoff? Is it going to improve it? What's your take on that?
With any of these various scenarios, the area of impervious surface, the surface that doesn't drain, or, surface that doesn't percolate through and sheets off, the area is exactly the same. So the quantity of the water is not affected. The velocity of the water increases as you increase the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
We're still talking about very minimal pitches in any of these scenarios where we don't think there's going to be any noticeable difference. But yes, if we were to pick up the street end of the parking lot and make it more level, then the rate of flow of the water would be a little bit less.
A little bit less, okay. And that's assuming that the curbing and the bioswale do the job you envisioned them doing in terms of catching that runoff.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions about this graphic depiction of parking lot grades?
This, the plan that you're showing the section lines on, that's the old plan? That's not the adjusted plan?
You're correct. That's really just a key plan,
Yeah,
just
okay.
so you know where the slices are taken.
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Okay, so just to summarize for the committee, the way I understand it, we've been at this as a continuing agenda item for, this is, I believe, the third meeting. We've authorized redesign. Kevin has provided us with that redesign. The redesign's been priced by our construction manager, and I'm assuming that this was priced by the trade contractors that have already been retained for the project?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not a kind of, we hope this number works. It's numbers that you sent the drawings out to the contractor.
Correct, and they got us prices back with what they saw the drawings. We brought in our estimating team to vet those numbers out, see what they had scoped out on their bid, and he found a few things that they missed, called them, said, yeah, I agree with you, I didn't see that, change the numbers minorly, and that's where we were from there.
Could I just add to that, the structural steel number that's in our estimate is a number that we came up with on our own.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you. So, and this number does not include the parking lot. There's going to be a expense involved in the parking lot. This number, this issue is certainly going to impact contingency. As a matter of fact, it wipes it out. The 337 doesn't stand a chance against 380 plus the parking lot.
If I may, so, Mark, that number does not include shutting the job down and restarting it? And
Correct.
does it include general conditions, or does it?
It does not. If we were stopped for a period of time where you went back for more funding, there would be
We're not,
raises to this.
We're not going back. Whatever happens
I
here,
just wanna make
this
sure that's
project
clear.
is not stopping
Yeah.
after all this. I'm speaking just for myself. We have discussed the grant options. We've heard from Joe, we've heard from the first selectman. We are told that this work, if it were to go ahead, is FEMA eligible, but any additional cost on this project is going to be FEMA eligible, as long as it's not something which is inconsistent with the guidelines of the worksheet. Worksheet, which we're all familiar with. There is an aesthetic issue here. The committee's worked pretty hard at keeping the building elevation down as much as possible, including some of the design work that your firm did, Kevin. We've tried to mitigate what you're going to see from the road in the neighborhoods, and this would go against the grain of that mitigation. I'm a little bit concerned, frankly, about the material change. So we've taken this project through town bodies twice. We've had public sessions, public meetings about the building and its height and its location. Some very well attended, and some very vocal neighbors who we've been trying to listen to. So I'm just saying that because I just want to remind the committee, remind the public about the thoroughness of we've approached this particular decision. So that said, I'd like to hear, going around the table, any thoughts or opinions before this vote is called, starting from your end?
I think enough's enough. We have the public, we have the RTM, we have all the boards. They've seen the designs, it's been approved, we have the funding. You know, if we go through with this one, then 2 weeks from now, we'll probably get hit with something else. It's silly to go into a project with no contingency, and we can't go back through to add contingency without starting the project. So my personal feeling is we have a plan, we have a project, we have the money, and let's just start.
Okay. Thank you. Rich?
I think we should just go on with the project, do not make any changes, do not elevate.
Thank you. Andy?
I mean, there's something to be said for elevating the building. It is current best practice. If we were starting the project today, like Kevin has said, we would probably be seriously examining, 1 foot of freeboard if we were designing the project, potentially designing the project. Yeah. Given where we are right now, though, I think there's absolutely zero appetite on my part to have this board go in front of the other town boards, because we will need to, at least once with this. That's not to say that we don't run into any other issues going forward. It's going to eat further into contingency. So, I am of the opinion of moving forward with no changes to the project.
Thank you. Mallory?
I'm also in favor of moving forward with no changes. We have to move forward, not backwards. I don't want to repeat what everybody else said. It's also not in our charge to find grant money. That's not what we do. That's what maybe other town bodies do. It was presented to us, we evaluated it, and I think we just have to move on.
David?
I couldn't support any change that would use up our contingencies. And if no one has the appetite for additional funding, I say we move ahead.
Rob?
I say we keep the project where it is. It's funded, it's been approved, it's been vetted, and let's just get it done.
Ryan?
I would like to thank my colleagues for giving me the opportunity to not have to say anything at this point in time, because I agree with you all.
Sorry.
So wait, since you're the parliamentary, since there's a motion...
You want me to call the question? Is that what you want me to do?
We don't have to. It's
No,
done.
I'm going to let the chair.
So if
We have a motion.
I don't want anybody to
Okay,
sit here and say we called the
If I
question.
withdraw my second and Ian withdraws his motion, can we move on?
Yeah, we could just vote on it and done.
What do we have to vote on?
No,
You have a motion.
Yeah, we have
a
to vote
motion
on
and
existing
second,
motions and second, and
absolutely.
we vote on it, right?
Absolutely, and it's important enough, and it's proof that where the committee is on this issue. I mean, you could probably just simply reject it, but if you want to go on record, there's no stronger or more definitive way to go on record than to have a motion, which is on the table, it's been made and seconded. Are there any changes or any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, I'm going to call this vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All right.
Against? Abstain? Thank you.
First vote, aye, and hasn't been voted against.
Yeah, it's the first
This is the
unanimous
first aye,
vote.
I don't know what to do.
First of many.
No. Just quit while you're ahead.
That was a compliment.
Okay, let's make
Proposing we adjourn?
Yeah, motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
Yeah, let's go home for 10 years.
Jim, I did that in all due respect. I did that so that we would hopefully not have to drag on for 3 hours, and so that we could get to a vote tonight, and I hope you don't mind.
Not at
Thank
all,
you.
not at all. No, I'm with you. My job is to try to balance all of the issues and certainly the public and certainly the taxpayer and certainly the neighborhood. And that's the reason I asked the first selectman to come in here so that he could give us some guidance as far as the grants, because that certainly has a financial impact as far as the town's concerned. That said, the next agenda item we have is a project status report from Shawmut. Did I send you a copy of the letter? You can look at this. We may change it tonight, but this is what we put together. Okay, you want to take this through quickly?
Yeah, I'll give you a brief update as to where we are now. We did mobilize last week, at the beginning of the week. We personally mobilized before that. Sub started mobilizing last week, I should say. The site fence is up. The scrim is on the fence. We allowed our site contractor to dictate what he could do on the beach with as much room as he needed to do it safely without anybody sunbathing on the beach being a worry. All this was discussed with the town as well. Mr. Lombardo was involved with all the site fence placing, and all our erosion controls are in place or are currently going in. Hay bales and silt fence are going in, and we're pretty much separate from the neighborhood now. We're in our own kind of containment and can lock everything down. And as far as site setup, we're almost there. Our site trailer is on site. We do have power and everything to the trailer. We do have data. We do have copiers, and we're all ready to start working out of there. I'll be showing up every day now that I have the abilities to do office work down there. And really, what we're going to be looking forward to do is press on. We are a little bit ahead of schedule. I know the berm isn't demoed out yet, but that wasn't really critical path. We can still make it to our schedule with the berm being a little bit delayed. That was delayed due to the tree warnings. The tree warden had to mark the trees, and they had to sit for 10 days for anybody to appeal that. I guess that is done. It won't affect our schedule at all. We do have the demolition contractor starting a couple days early, as a matter of fact. So we're ready to roll.
Is that site secure?
Yes, the site is secure. It is a 6-foot chain link fence, and a lot of college students party on that beach, and there's nothing we can do to prevent someone from climbing over that fence. We're not putting barbed wire on it. It's not a jail. College kids that drink can get boisterous and climb over a fence every now and then, and there's really nothing that you can do to prevent that. The fence is solid. It's driven posts. It's got the scrim, which makes it a lot more difficult for somebody to climb a fence because the scrim's on it, and it's as secure as can be for what was spec'd out for a site fence.
Just, I'd like to add, living down there and having walked it several times, I think they have done as good a job as anyone could hope for. And to your point, what's going to happen is going to happen. If college kids want to scale it, they're going to scale it. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that.
They could scale a 12-foot fence.
Right. No, I think they've secured it as best as could possibly be done.
Are there any other things that we should know about, other than what you're saying here about the tasks and events being on time? Is there anything else going on down there, unforeseen conditions that you've run across, issues that you need help from the committee on?
Not yet, no. We're disconnected. Sewer's all disconnected. The building is separated from the pavilion to the, recommendation of our demo contractor. It's far enough. They said, yep, I'm good with that. We can pull it down now and without damaging the existing. All the Trex boards are coming off on the deck in the back. We're getting ready to start cutting the joists at that roof level. So, and then today we had a meeting with the building movers, DeStefano, Chamberlain. They have all their prints ready for the engineered drawings for moving the house. They're going to be submitting a formal drawing set soon, but our concerns were vetted with them in terms of the locations of steel and where they're putting it, and the locations of what's shown on the drawings for the new steel. They have enough room to get everything in and out, and they're getting ready to come on board at the end of the month.
A couple of comments. One is, we need this each time we meet, which I don't think is a problem for you.
No problem at all.
And we need it a day or two before this meeting, 24 hours minimum, so we have an opportunity as committee members to look at it. We keep on having that as a issue as far as not necessarily with Shawmut, but just getting information to us on a timely basis.
Certainly.
Have you had an opportunity to look at this draft letter to the neighborhood? It has some obligations as far as you guys are concerned, dust, debris to control, traffic, so
Yep,
forth?
and our demo contractor's starting at 8, and pile driving's gonna be starting at 8 o'clock to 4:30.
Okay, but I'm mainly concerned about demolition trucks, demolition debris, that it's secure, that it's covered, and that we don't have stuff falling out through the neighborhood, dust, debris. Somebody's gonna have to talk to each one of these drivers.
They
Is that
have water,
happening?
they have water controls in place. It's written into their scope
How
for
about
any
talking
kind
to
of
the
dust.
drivers about how they drive, that it's a busy residential
Oh,
neighborhood?
yeah, our site superintendent has safety meetings for anybody that comes on site. The
But
first
drivers don't generally fall into that
They do
routine,
on,
but
if they come
will
onto
with
our
you?
site, they do, yes.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Right now, there's lights in front of the parking lot. Are those lights going to stay? Because if it's lit, it's going to make it that much harder for kids to have fun. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about the lights that face down, right in there along Beach Road.
Yeah, those are the parking lot
Double-edged sword.
lights.
The security's better if it's lit. And I know it's an attractive nuisance if it's lit, but
I'm sorry, it's better lit or not lit?
better lit.
That's what I'm asking, if those lights are going to stay.
The lights are scheduled to remain. I'm not sure if they're able to be energized at this
I
point.
don't believe they are.
They were on last night, I can tell you that.
Oh, that's our answer.
They were on last
Then
night.
they're
and
not
I
fed
drove
from the
by.
circuit from the building.
I
We
don't know
need
if
them
it-
on. We need them on. You can't have a site like that in a beach environment with no lights.
What's that? We can go look right now, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any questions as far as Chalmert's concerned in their report? Anything else we should know? Okay.
I just add one thing, what we've found so far on the job site in terms of the porous pavers. There were 2 small areas that had to be removed for utility capping, and we're finding a lot of them are actually broken. So we may find that half of them can't be put back.
That's up to you and Joe. I think he was trying to salvage them, and if they can't be salvaged, or only a few of them can be salvaged, we can't get into that detail. Does it,
Quick question? I didn't realize that was an issue, but if it is an issue, I mean, you've got heavy trucks, starting to move in and out. Well, why don't you take the pavers up now before you start doing all that?
It's pretty clear they're not broken from the last 2 weeks of construction. I mean, they're cracked throughout the parking lot. And that's a double-edged sword also as far as taking them out. Then you have to put something back in that void to keep the construction area level. That is a discussion we had on site with Sean, superintendent, and with Joe Michelangelo. And the general feeling was just to leave them right there. That was the safest approach.
Don't building design specs that have been submitted and approved to this body say that they're supposed to be picked up and stored off-site?
Yes, they do.
yeah.
So I guess it kind of begs the question, and look, I hate to be the hard guy on this, but this isn't the first time in the last, month that we've come to a meeting and found an issue that this body had already agreed upon, and now we learn that our design and construction team has gone off on their own with a different agenda.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case, but certainly, let's just take this one thing at a time. The issue is, let's turn it around a little bit. Is there a request by Wolf, the house mover, that there be a gravel pad put down where the building comes across?
That is something that came up today, is that they need a more level surface where the building is rolled out.
Okay.
And some of that would be accomplished anyway by the filling of the parking lot. So
Okay.
it's just a question of when that has to happen.
What-
That
what's-
has not been coordinated yet.
What's anticipated, what would you do about these pavers? Would you take them up before you put that pad down? Or cover them over?
It would be best if they could be taken up before the pad goes down, yeah. But that's also a timing question, because it has to happen before Wolf can move the building. So we have a month and a half or so before we'll be at that point.
Are any of them being destroyed through these laterals that are being dug, or?
Well, those were the 2 areas that they were actually picked up by hand with just hand shovels.
Right.
They weren't dug out by a big
Okay.
machine.
Are they going to be in danger of being damaged over the next, before the Wolf question has to be resolved about fill? Are there any areas out there that are getting beaten up? Are you running track machines over them or anything?
No, but they were all pretty beaten up from the get-go.
The track machines are actually less of
Less, 'cause the
less
tires
of a
are so
concern
big.
than the rubber tire equipment. And they haven't had anything on the job site in terms of rubber-tired equipment worse than a
Right.
town plow truck or garbage truck that would have been there over the last
Right,
5 years.
would you get together with Joe Michelangelo and just make sure that we are not damaging them any further? And if they have to be taken up earlier, sooner than later, that's what we'll do?
Yeah, and as I said, we did have a meeting to that effect last week with Joe,
Okay.
so it is on his radar.
Is this report of yours distributed to, your site reports, is distributed to the full committee?
I haven't today, but I can.
Would you do that?
Sure.
I'd like to have the committee see that. This happens to be number 4. I mean, I just have copies to scan. I mean, it's not, this is number 4, but it'll give you an idea about the detail as far as Kevin's engineering and architectural oversight. Yeah, it's not here for discussion.
This is
it's
number
just for
5.
information. Well, then 5, sorry.
No, I thought maybe I meant-
That's why I said 4. Okay, thank you.
I have one thing to add. Since our last building committee meeting, our steel contractor has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
Excellent.
Sounds all right, timing.
Timing is good.
Just when we thought
Well-
we had it.
Well,
Why we
we
didn't go out of the
have
park.
already reached out to the second bidder, which is QSR. All right, they were, I believe, 30 grand more in their bid. We are currently going through the legal process, our legal team, to find out what we can do about executing their bid bond, which would make up that difference. And that ball is rolling. I don't have answers to what exactly will happen, but we're probably going to get the process going to get the second bid steel guy on board, get some shop drawings going, because we still have time for that. And so
You
there
don't-
may not be a hiccup.
You don't anticipate any hiccups with shop drawings or anything like that, with timing of those?
No. I mean, the steel package isn't the
It's not
biggest
very
steel
complex,
package
right.
in the world. And, even small amount to say, hey, can you expedite the drawings because we're here, it wouldn't be much.
Right.
But we are in the process of finding out legally what we can do by their bid bond.
What was it that you said, the project that keeps giving?
Yeah, would you make sure that you
That's what we said
consult
today.
with purchasing on this?
Sure.
Use the full leverage of the town? Anything else? Any questions regarding this?
That's
Yeah.
all you can do for now.
Yep.
They
And-
did the right procedure as far as going after the bid bond goes.
Yeah.
With the letters of
Um,
intent and bid hold agreements, because we went
Ye-
longer than their 90-day bid hold that they're allowed to, and we did some internal letters to say, are you willing to hold that bid agreement for longer? They signed it, they got it back to me saying yes. Now
So-
it's in the hands of our legal team.
Yeah, well, how do I say this as politely as possible? You don't want to be pushed around by the surety. They'll respond directly to a municipality and not quite as directly to you. So I'm just saying, whether it's Mr. Attorney Lesser or whoever it is, I think this ought to be reviewed by the town, we ought to get aggressive.
Okay.
Because that's how the sureties respond. They don't pay any attention until you really go after them. That's it. Anything else? Any other good news?
Sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is Mr. Mayor here?
Hmm?
Mr. Mayor here?
He's over getting his head ripped off at the Board of Finance tonight.
Would you make sure, Kevin, that this gets fully distributed, because it's a great report?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yep. The next agenda item is a brief report from Project Oversight.
So, I just want to introduce my colleague, Ben Danton. He's going to be
What? What do we got going here?
Are you handing out the PowerPoint?
No, he's got a
Okay,
problem
cool.
with
I think
the
you set
camera.
the camera up
Yeah.
for this. so we
This
can-
doesn't happen in a presidential debate. So I don't know.
No, need this level of.
Right? They're seamless.
They got a bigger budget.
They do?
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
There's 2 documents again?
Yeah.
You want me to turn the lights on?
Yeah, that might help just for a little bit. I might fall asleep.
Yeah.
Jim, are we gonna get this every time?
So-
This
No,
is
I've got to see it first.
This, what you have in front of you is basically what you're going to see on the screen, so this will take review later on. Again, I wanted to introduce Ben Dan. He's my colleague who'll be working with me on this project. He'll be on site periodically each week. He's currently
stationed over at Sacred Heart University. We're working with the university and providing oversight as well, so he'll be going between the two projects. Speaking of field reports, we do have field reports. I wasn't sure of the protocol for distributing, so we will, I think we'll just distribute.
Yeah, sorry about that, Rich.
We'll distribute our reports accordingly as well, Jim, to the entire committee, if that's, is the charge.
Yeah.
We have, I think, 3 or 4 reports already, and I wasn't sure how to distribute these
I would
yet, so-
distribute them, yeah, absolutely, they should go to the committee.
Okay, we'll take care of that.
Is that-
So over the last, we've been under construction for, what, about 9 or 10 days now, so this is just going to show you, I'm not sure who's been out to the site. We thought it'd be helpful to take some, show you some photographs of the project. This is just a summary to date, obviously mobilization, temporary power, and pretty much mimics what Shawmut has kind of covered already for the work to date. We wanted to make sure that we're documenting the perimeter fence each time we go out there. Shawmut's their subs have done a great job of installing the fence. It is secure. The scrim is up where we expect it to be. There's also silt fence and hay bales in there as well, but this is along the front road here. You can see the construction trailer there. This is the construction entrance on, I think, the north end of the site, if I have it correctly. To the left of the, this is the access to the beach that they've maintained, and this is access into the actual site itself. So, the inside of the site, that's the erosion control measures they were talking about along the road. Again, pretty straightforward. This is a shot on the beach side, looking from the north southerly. The fence is pulled out. You'll notice it's pulled out a little bit farther so that they can construct the revetment and install that on the beach side of the bulkhead. So that's why that's out. Once that's complete, the fence is going to get moved back in closer to provide more beach space.
How many feet do you think we'll have from high tide to the fence after you move the fence back? Do you have any idea?
I don't know what the high tide elevation is. I know just, Kevin, do you know what the high tide elevation is here?
Well, I'll put it this way, you'll have just enough room to walk past the fence and around the lifeguard chairs. I mean, it's going to be pretty narrow.
At high water?
Okay.
So in other words, the people will not be able to sit on the beach then at high tide.
They'll have to go around the ends.
Yeah.
On the plans, the survey shows the top of the retaining wall 11.5 elevation. And I think Judy's saying that high tide might be 9, so it's probably, here's the edge. If anybody's been down there, there's kind of a drop off towards the ocean, so it's probably from this lifeguard stand, I'm guessing 10, 15 feet in front of that, where I think that got relocated.
I can tell you, from high tide to the bulkhead.
To the bulkhead, you're
60 feet.
Yeah, ballpark.
Exactly.
Ballpark.
Okay, keep us moving.
Yes, sir. Again, this is the beach looking back towards the access. You can see the scrim here, stops here. We had a question on whether it should be extended to the corner of the fence over here. The superintendent mentioned that the predominant wind is in the southwest direction, and it's going to catch it like a kite from the ocean, and they feel it's going to be a challenge. So we're going to monitor that and kind of see how that works. But it's stopping right here now. This here is the division between the locker room and the area that's going to be jacked up. You can see this is where they divided in the demo. This area to the left is going to be the demo portion. They removed the solar panels this week, and they'll start demoing this side over here to the left. This is a shot from the inside. You can see up through the roof where they're separating it here. Utility demolition. The trees will be coming down if they're not done already. These are just some pre-construction photos. Again, I'm sure most of you have probably seen it. The front street side, this is the back side of the pavilion. You can notice this column here. This is where it's scoured and settled quite a bit. In the front, it's pretty amazing how much it's settled in there. But again, just some pre-existing photos. Some of the inside that's in the meeting room, the great room. Colliers, we do have some concerns on the finishes in here, and when it gets jacked up, we we are concerned. I expressed some concerns with Kevin. We put the caveat, we haven't, been on the project long, so we're still kind of getting up to speed. So some of our views may be fresh and maybe naive, not knowing history. So I just want to put a caveat on that, but we are concerned about the trusses when those go back and the movement on that. That corner that you see down here, this floor dips quite a bit right here from where it was, and unknown what's going to happen once that thing gets jacked back up, and then the floor finish itself. So we have some concerns there. And that's basically it. That's just a few quick high-level
Want to
oversight.
hit the lights? Where are the lights?
Is there more power play or no?
No, that's
No.
it. That is it.
Thanks, Jerry. So along those lines, if you are running across technical issues, we'd like to have you address them to Kevin.
Okay.
Constructability issues, address to Shawmut. And if you have a problem, we need to hear about it accompanied by the solution. We don't want to hear about any problems unless somebody has a solution. Given where we are in this project today. So thank you. Anything else you'd add? I know that you're working on a GMP reconciliation.
Yes,
I don't think we need to go into that right now, given the
No,
meeting
just high
before
level,
this.
we've started going through all the meeting minutes, and, we have very limited information. Obviously, we weren't here during design, so that's the extent of information we have. So what we're trying to do is kind of go through, identify some of the hot items. We know the pavers were an item. We're trying to identify what other items might have been point of, I'll say, contention or of concern with the committee, and try to follow them through to how they were resolved, and ultimately were they resolved in the documents as well. So we're looking at that. We're going to be looking, again, into the GMP, and we have some questions on how allowances are going to be reconciled and captured. But we'll provide a full detailed report. It'll be in writing as to our concerns. Again, with a caveat, we have limited information and we weren't here, obviously. So again, some of them may be obvious to either Shawmut or to Stefan Kamen or the committee. It might be, we already know about it, but we'll highlight it anyways. We're not going to assume that anybody knows about it. So that'll be in the next meeting. We'll be complete with that.
Okay, for the committee's information, there was a meeting just prior to this at 5 o'clock that was internal to Finance, Purchasing, Shawmut, and Chuck, and with the idea of this ongoing reconciliation to GMP. We want to start the project out with the kind of budget would be turned over to you guys on the subcommittee. So we're all in agreement on, everything else has been flushed out of it, any questions, issues. Not unusual for a project that's taken 2 years in gestation to have issues related to an old invoice or what was charged or what account. I want that solved now, not when we're doing it, not at the end of the project. That's all right with the committee. Questions as far as this report? Thank you, Chuck. Any questions you have, any issues that we need to know about?
No, I expressed, we just had a brief walk through the structure. We didn't stay in long just because of safety concerns. I didn't want our staff in there not knowing what's going on. But
Right.
Just have to monitor as we go and see how things turn out. Once this thing starts getting raised, that's where we're going to see a lot of, what happens with it.
Any questions from the committee?
No.
Okay.
I just had one question. Chuck, have you guys talked with purchasing about what process we're going to use for monthly payment requisitions?
As far as from
Who gets it and then it goes to who? And then it goes
well,
to-
what we suggested at the last meeting, our typical role with Fairfield and Riverfield, I've referenced that before, when we're the OPM, is we would typically gather all the invoices if the town receives them, typically send them to me to put together for your review. We would review them ourselves against purchase orders and items that are contracted, and make recommendation to you if, for payment or not payment on that. But that's what we would recommend going forward, is that we be the gatherer, the gatekeeper, and send it to you. We have a package tonight with a couple of invoices that the format we would recommend using, if it's okay with you folks.
Okay, we'll get to that. That's what that is, right?
Yeah, I think that's going to be probably the invoices.
All right, we have an agenda item for that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this particular agenda item? The Building Committee, Finance Committee has been formed, correct? Steve's not
Oh,
here.
we need a third member.
I thought we had, Rich, you're the third member?
Yes,
Yes?
I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, so Steve, went through that drill.
Okay.
We have, I think, before us in our, hopefully, packages, documents, that everybody get a copy of the, or maybe you got it through email, a copy of the proposed,
Duties and responsibilities?
yeah. Does everybody have a copy of that, or no?
Actually, just handed out to us with the PowerPoint.
No.
No, it was not.
No.
No?
Which one are we looking for now?
We came through an email.
There's an email from Steve.
An email from,
Oh,
an email from Steve that outlines the roles and responsibilities of our finance committee, our three-member finance committee.
Oh,
Everybody had an opportunity to see that?
I think it came on Tuesday, I believe. We looked at
Monday, although it was only sent to 4 people.
Okay,
I didn't get it.
It didn't go to the whole committee.
it did?
I didn't, no, it didn't, I didn't notice. It
Okay.
It went to 5 of us.
If you would distribute it, and we'll take it up on
I will.
the 24th, and in the meantime, we'll assume that you, three of you are activated.
Activation, that's an interesting concept.
But Steve put a tremendous amount of time and effort into
Yeah.
putting together roles and
Well,
responsibilities.
he's
I want the
very
committee,
knowledgeable.
you get it in the mail. It's going to be important because we're in effect delegating responsibility to this three-member finance committee, which would deal with invoices, change orders, and so forth, and speed up the process. Anybody have any questions about that? It'll be deferred to the next meeting. I did circulate a very rough draft of a letter to the community, which we are hoping would go out, through your group and then through Fairfield Beach page.
Yeah.
And I think that covers it. I know it's going to be, it's going to be brought up at the Sherman PTA as far as the school's concerned. We did get information to Fairfield Citizen, which was part of our goal. It was, I think, a good article for us. That said, any questions about that letter? Anything you want to add in, like no gum chewing or?
Just how is it?
Who are they going to contact if there's problems?
Well,
Blank at the end.
you saw that long
Uh-huh.
blank.
Yeah.
Shawmut has agreed to
The long
furnish the telephone numbers and names.
Alright.
So I think that there ought to be a contractor phone number and there ought to be a DPW phone number. So both local, contractor and town.
Yeah.
Because the town is ultimately the owner here. Unless somebody on this committee wants to put their name down there.
I don't think it should be, but we should be aware of it. I hate to find out later that, maybe they should have responsibility after they deal with the issue, just send a comment to you on how it was dealt with.
What's the access as far as the website is concerned? Can that be used, or is that would be better with a phone call?
Oh, they could they could use our email address if they wanted to email.
That's assuming somebody's picking it up, though, on our end.
It gets bounced, if somebody emails the committee, it gets bounced automatically to me.
Okay.
So, they'd be better off contacting DPW. They can email contacting DPW and then contacting Shawmut for immediate, if there's something happening immediately.
Yeah, I think Shawmut would be the priority and DPW would be the backup.
Either
Yeah.
or, yeah.
Okay. So I'll need a number for the letter. Next agenda item is a little bit out of order, is the approval. Are you presenting these requisitions, or is purchasing, or where are we?
No, we typically, on our projects, they do an extra copy.
This is the package right here?
Yes, yeah, basically, this, you see the cover letter here, it's just really just to help guide us through the approval process for the most part. I have signatures, we'll add, Rich, especially out. It's really up to you, you don't have to sign it, just again, when we sign it, it helps the purchasing department say it's okay to pay. Instead of waiting for the meeting minutes to come out. But we typically present these to the building committees.
Can you just number these going forward so we know this is?
That's right, you asked back for the last one, so
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, I know you have a date on it, but you don't know how many could be in between.
All right, do you want to quickly walk us through?
Sure.
And-
So-
And what we're looking at here is recommendations for payment?
That is correct. What we will typically do, if we just look at the Stefano and Chamberlain's first one, at the very top, you'll see a stamp from Colliers that has my signature and a date. That budget block code is our code within our system that we identify where we assess it to. It's more for internal. But that is basically recommendation for payment to the committee.
I don't know what your policy is. Can this in some way be referenced to a line item in the budget? How do you, in other words, so we know, well, let me ask you a question. When you did Riversville, I know you did it this way.
Yes.
But none of these things were referenced to a particular line item in the budget? So in other words, there's an invoice for $100.
Yes.
In other words, if we knew which line item it was going to, it would be easy for Steve and I and Rich to be able to look at this thing.
Oh, certainly, we can, when we send it to you, we can send our financial summary report that we've displayed before, and it'll say like the 4, it'll be like architect line item. And that's where we come, we can
Fair
certainly send that, and as well as summary reports.
We'd always approve yours, though.
One item that Steve did ask, and I talked about, Kevin, is provide a little more breakout of where, what the contracted value is for construction services.
Well, that's what I said, so it's tied into something.
What's the balance, what's the remaining to be paid, et cetera, and we'll work on it. There's a spreadsheet that I attached to in the back, didn't print out the right way, I apologize, but.
Your status report, where we are.
Exactly, and we'll have it ours too, but yeah, we typically see that, so we'll work on getting that revised so that it's clear when you review what the status is right on that.
As a committee, we're going to rely pretty heavily on the 3-person, the 2 votes out of 3-person finance committee, so whatever you guys need. Okay, what do you want us to approve?
So,
you see this?
there's 3,
I got 'em. You have it?
3 invoices. I'll read them off. I don't know if you do them individually in the past, or you do them all after we read them. I'm not sure what you've done in the past.
I think it's we can go through it.
Oh, it's here.
No, you can go through them all. I mean, just take us through them, and then if there's an objection, we'll vote separately.
Certainly. So first, invoices for DeStefano and Chamberlain, invoice number 5423, dated February 29, 2016, in the amount of $10,020. These services are for the balance of modifying the documents for pricing to raise the building 1 foot and associated improvements with that. This invoice is within their budget for the architect line item. The second and third invoices are from Colliers. The first invoice is 15323, dated February 1st of 2016, in the amount of $6,226.55. That represents one question that Mr. Pinello had asked, is if our fees are based on a prorated or by hourly. Our contract is a prorated fee from January through November. I think I forwarded that to the committee just for clarification. So in the invoices, if you look in the back, you're going to see the monthly fee will be the same each month, and then at the bottom, we have our reimbursable expenses that are part of the contract as well. Again, that's all within the purchase order. The second invoice is 15492, dated 2/29/2016. This is for the month of February. Total amount $6,323.88. Construction oversight.
Okay, so this has been presented for approval. Are there questions? Well, first a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Made and seconded.
I'll second it.
Discussion?
I would just interject at this point that Steve and myself going over these quite a bit. I didn't have a chance to do it with David, but it's still a little bit up in the air about the submittals, and I think how it's going to be reconciled for the contracts that are with the various professionals and vendors. So it's not a closed deal, although I would recommend that these invoices that are presented are quite acceptable and should be paid.
Okay. I'm particularly with you on the fact that you'd like to see the amount that's already been paid, the request, and the amount and the balance, so you have a feel for where you are.
That's what
Yeah.
we talked about.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of this motion, which is to pay these abstentions? Thank you. I have a couple of brief comments before we get into public comment. I want to make sure that our construction manager, our engineer, and our oversight function are well coordinated and understand each other's roles. We need to make sure when it comes to emails and so forth that, that Kevin, that you are responsible for engineering. We're going to be looking to you for a lot of these regulatory issues. We get involved in this bulkhead and so forth and so on. Joe Michelangelo really represents the town as far as the ultimate owner. I think oversight is important, very important. I think that you need to communicate, if you have issues, you should communicate them through the chair, and I'll indicate to what the distribution should be. So I want to make sure that as we go forward, everybody's comfortable in their role and everybody's doing their job, and we've got the appropriate amount of communication and so forth. The flurry of emails over the past week was something to behold when it came to the DEEP or whatever they are, and FEMA and Joe and so forth. So I'm looking for a little law and order. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it, but I think it'll. And Kevin, your application of law and order to these issues was much appreciated. So that's where I'd like to keep us going. Access, as far as the committee, I want to remind the committee members to go through the chair when you're reaching out to any of our design or management professionals, so we can just keep some sense of law and order in it. What was one of the other things that came up? Site access, I would encourage committee members, if they want to go on site, just to make sure that you go through the site superintendent, so that you have a hard hat and vest and safety glasses, whatever else they're going to require of you visiting the site. Otherwise, the site is really secure and should be kept secure.
To that point, rather than anyone going when they want, like, we live there, could we pick, let's say, once a month, you say that anyone who wants to come to the site at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, we could all go at the same time, so rather than have people straying in and out, because theoretically, if I go to site, you let me in, but maybe I shouldn't just walk in just because I happen to be in the neighborhood. Is that a problem? Well, let me ask you, let me read it this way. How did they do at the River School?
Yeah, we would actually, during the summer when the school was shut down and we couldn't get into the building, we would schedule time just before the building committee or just after, maybe an hour before, and we'd do a guided tour with the construction manager, so that one, they can make sure that where we're walking that you're safe and advise you if there's a, hole over here or excavation, we want to make sure that that's guided by the CM. So that's a great, we did basically like you said it, Dave. Scheduled it and walked through.
You can try it. I mean,
You can schedule it before the meeting if you wanted to.
yeah.
And it's right after the workday
And
is
they're
done.
going to be
At
on
5
site, so I
o'clock.
mean, I don't want to speak for Sean, but if someone reaches out to them, so we'd like to take a walk before, I'm sure.
Especially this time of year, it's light, so if you wanted to schedule, if anyone wanted to go to site at 5 o'clock, and they could, someone would be there to let us in, so we wouldn't just walk in any old time we
Not a whole lot
wanted.
to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Yeah, okay.
I'll bring my own hard hat if you want.
Any other questions about site access or communication? We did have a request to get the GMP budget up on the website, and our financials in general. I'm not sure where we are in that. I need to
I'll
talk to you
check,
about
but
it.
it was already up there, but
Yeah.
I'll check.
We have a hard-earned reputation for getting stuff up there and being transparent. I'd like to maintain that. We certainly have the total project budget, which could go up there.
Yeah, I mean, a budget document is definitely up there.
All
but I
right,
need to
let's
go back
make
and
sure we
double
have the
check.
right information.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else as far as, before we go to public comment from the committee members? No? Look forward to public comment. We did get your correspondence from flood and erosion, and it's been circulated to the committee, but we don't have any...
No, actually, Cynthia's chair.
We don't have any response yet, but we will. We have your, whose lengthy document it was, but...
It's not lengthy. I'm Dick Mahusky, Colonial Drive, Fairfield.
And I'm also a member of the Flood and Erosion Control Board. I'm not officially representing them, but one of the things that came up, and I sent the letter, I presume you saw it. I don't know if it's a moot point now, because when I was looking at the revised drawings compared to the original drawings, there were two things. One was that after the Conservation Department review, the rubble core of the berm over what we call Horse Hill, that was pulled back toward the pavilion. It didn't go as far toward the Rickards Beach as original. And the other thing was that the finished grade at that new berm, the Horse Hill, was reduced from 12 feet to 11 feet. Now, as far as all of the neighborhood in the floodplain beyond that berm, this is detrimental to them. And I just, again, if we go back to the original drawings, then it's a moot point. But I just want to point that out, that we Flood and Erosion Control Board tried to make a pitch to get that barrier to flooding as high as possible. We got it to 12 feet, so please don't back up to 11 feet.
Kevin, does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it's something, you can use that.
Yes, so what had happened was, when we got to the building permit sign-off process, we needed a sign-off from conservation, and that's when it was brought to my attention that there was actually an imaginary property line, well, a real property line, to the east end of the pavilion building, separating the pavilion property from Rickards Beach, which is conservation space managed by the Conservation Commission. At the time, and I believe I brought it to the committee's attention, we didn't want to hold up the building permit process, so we scaled back the end of the revetment. Now, there's nothing to say we can't file an application with the Conservation Commission to extend the revetment further into their space. It obviously will generate a significant review on their part, but if that's something the committee wants us to do, we will.
You think it'll go smoothly?
I went there the other day, and there's a surveyor has put property markers for stake for the property, and if you eyeball it and you look at the topographical map, there is a 13-foot elevation on Rickards Beach. And I don't know, with a little bit of care by the excavator operator, I don't think we have to get onto that, past that imaginary sacred line at all.
Man, my only concern with that is it's not so much the sand grade itself. I think we could probably do that without crossing the line, but it's the overdig for the boulders that are buried below that crest that I just know it's going to push us past the property line. And it was made very clear to me that that is a sacred line that we would need the commission's full approval before we cross it to do anything.
Well, let's do it. I mean, let's make the application. I mean, we don't know what we're dealing with unless we push them or make the application.
Okay.
I mean, that's our goal is, we haven't changed our position as far as protecting the beach.
Fine.
I mean,
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
One other comment, looking at these status reports, I would request that you do put them on your webpage. The information there is very helpful to anyone who wants to see it.
Okay, we might, rather than going forward into the construction phase, maybe in the next meeting, 2 weeks from now, you might give us a bullet outline as to what you think we should post. So that, in other words, we have, instead of just posting everything or random stuff, we think through, or maybe get us to talk us through at the next meeting.
Well, we're going to have, if you think of the regular schedule, we're going to have a project update. I mean, I think getting an update from DeStefano and Chamberlain and getting an update from Colliers is redundant. I mean, I'm not sure when you do your report, your written report, what audience that's for. Is that internally, sort of internal tracking and dissemination, or is it?
Well, just as a general rule, as the architect and engineer, if I go to the site, then I have to make a site report for my benefit, for the owner's benefit, for the contractor's benefit. There will be some reports where I may find an issue and I have to bring it to their attention to fix. So I do that anyway.
Right.
This is what I'm saying.
Priority would be your, as oversight. I mean, if you're looking at the hierarchy of, it's either going to come from the construction manager oversight or the engineer. Engineer gets technical, oversight would be appropriate. So,
And I think I'm going to talk to Kathleen Griffin about actually taking it out of the files and documents section and actually seeing if we could just put it up up top on the webpage, and I just have a sort of just a running list of the Collier's project updates, and we'll just start stacking them. And that'll be the regular document that we start posting.
Yeah, your update is going to obviously be more than what we saw?
Yeah,
or-
this was just a snapshot this evening, we're just getting
All right.
going. This isn't, we have the same format again from Riverfield that we give a synopsis of from the last.
So that's the most generic, the simplest.
Yeah,
the most-
yeah, it's just what
that's
happened
what
since the
your
last report.
job is, actually.
Issues going on, and I can forward it.
And Kevin, you'll keep, okay, you'll keep circulating these to us, and if it's necessary, we'll, if we see one that
I've
should be
been going out to
posted.
the site about twice a week
Yeah.
on average, so I expect it'll continue like that.
Okay, any other, speaking of public comment, I know you've got your full or partial Shawmut contingent. Anything other than what we've been talking about tonight as far as the project is concerned? Any issues you're running across on this super?
Going good.
Okay. Any other public comments? Yes?
I have just a quick request. Would you add to your next agenda the return of the pavers? You
Yeah.
tabled that last time. I think that's a serious issue. I think the public would like to address it, and I think it should be on your agenda.
To return them or return it to as an agenda item?
I think you're a master of rhetoric.
I'm just concerned, I think that the thing that concerns me is getting them salvaged, frankly, wherever they go, back or be used around town or whatever, they go back into the parking lot.
Okay, I think the role of permeable pavers in the final project, they need to put that.
Yeah.
I think they have a role to play. I think we'd like to address that.
Yeah, okay, good.
And thank you for not putting that monstrous banquet hall another foot into the Fairfield skyline. That's an aesthetic.
Well, we labored
That's
over
an
it.
aesthetic goal that you guys have, we owe you for.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Heard it, seconded, thank you.
Unanimous. Thanks, Rich.
Jamie.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Pissed off at your husband?